Okay, hello everybody. Hope everyone can hear me okay, and welcome to the second webinar in the Grassland Insights from Soil to Sward series. My name's Lisa Black and I'm head of the Agronomy and Plant Science branch in AFBI. If you were here last week, you'll know that the first webinar was focused on how to make grassland deliver for you and explored practical ways to make grassland deliver for more consistently across the season. It also looked at reducing grassland costs by using legumes and diverse swards, and how to adopt a whole farm approach to make sure each field has a sward best suited to its conditions and soil. And soil is the focus of tonight's webinar, so soil, why does it matter? We have two great presentations for you today, followed by a panel discussion with panelists representing YFCU, CAFRE and farming. I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A button on the screen and encourage you to submit questions for our speakers and panel as we go through the presentations. So on to tonight's topic, soil, why does it matter? As you all probably know, soil underpins production on grassland farms, and healthy soil provides resilience from adverse weather, and the current start to this growing season has been particularly difficult with its persistent rain. We'll be exploring how soil analysis, nutrient planning, and looking after soil structure is the foundation of productive grassland systems and really drives fertiliser efficiency. And with prices sure to increase in coming months, that's becoming increasingly important more than ever. We have two speakers this evening. One is an AFBI scientist and a second a farmer, putting science into action and highlighting the importance of good science translation. Our first speaker is Dr. Suzanne Higgins. Suzanne is a soil scientist with over 25 years experience and is head of the Agri-Environment branch in AFBI. Suzanne is going to be talking about the three pillars of soil health, soil biology, soil chemistry and physics, and presenting emerging data from the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. So I'm going to hand over to Suzanne now and invite you to share your slides and give us your presentation. Thanks, Suzanne.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Suzanne Higgins and I'm a soil scientist at AFBI, and I'm very happy to be talking about the importance of soil on your farm tonight. Okay, good. So soil is one of our greatest natural assets. Soil is a living, functioning ecosystem. It sustains crop growth, it filters water, it regulates our climate, and it enhances biodiversity. So in Northern Ireland, our aim is to protect and enhance our soils. So what we mean by soil health is how well our soil functions. So soil delivers multiple ecosystem services, and whenever your soil is healthy, it is more resilient. So what we want to do is build soil health on your farm to make it more resilient to climate extremes and other stresses. So for example, if your soil is healthy, it will recover from periods of flooding, and it will recover from periods of drought, and it will bounce back and be productive after stresses. So for example, this winter has been one of the wettest on record. So from December 2025 until February, we had over 170% above average rainfall in some parts of Northern Ireland. So you can see this recent Met Office picture, and in the southeast of Northern Ireland, we had over up to 170% above average rainfall over the period between December and February. And this places a lot of stress on our soils. So whenever soils are subjected to continuous rainfall, it increases the risk of soil compaction. And over the last few years, we've had an increasing number of these yellow weather warnings where there's extremely high intensity rainfall in a very short period of time. So I've got a short video here of one of the yellow weather warning events and some of the things we would see on fields across Northern Ireland. So this was a very common occurrence several times this winter where there was yellow weather warnings and very high intensity rainfall in a short period of time. So at the side of this field here was just a stream or a shuck, and it actually overflowed during this high intensity rainfall, and it spills out onto the field. It runs across the field, causing surface runoff, taking soil and nutrients with it. Okay, so whenever we have very high intensity rainfall like this over a prolonged period of time, it increases surface runoff, but it also increases the vulnerability to soil compaction. So it weakens the soil structure. So whenever you place a load on top of the soil, such as grazing animals or machinery, it compresses the soil and results in soil compaction. So usually your soil has quite an open structure like this, where there is pores with air, oxygen in it, and channels for the water to run through. Whenever you have soil compaction, the soil compresses, so the water can't drain through it, and there's less oxygen in the soil. So what you would see in the field, you would see areas of surface runoff like this. You'd also see parts of the field which continuously would persistently flood after heavy rainfall. It means the soil, you can see the soil is compacted there, the water can't infiltrate. It would also cause patchy growth. And you can also see where there's wheel tracks in the field. Often this causes soil compaction where there's areas of heavy traffic. The soil can get a very sticky, cloddy appearance, and it can be a blue colour in colour where there's sign of less oxygen in the soil. So what we have to do is try and manage our soils, particularly at this time of year where there's been persistent heavy rainfall all winter. So at this time of the year, our soils are still very saturated. This is when they're still weak and vulnerable. And if we go out too early with heavy slurry tankers and other heavy machinery, or out with grazing animals too early, we can cause a lot of damage to our soil structure. So how do we manage or prevent soil compaction? So we need to manage the timing of field operations. So the advice is to keep off fields when they're very wet. And this is very difficult at this time of year when we need to get our slurry out, but it's best we try and avoid going on wet fields with heavy machinery. So if we can use an umbilical system where possible, reduce axle loads, ideally below 5 tons, use larger tire diameters and width in combination with low inflation pressure. And if you have to drive across the field, you can have sacrifice areas where you restrict traffic to designated tram lines rather than fan out from access points. So you can often see areas of compaction around gateways or water troughs where there's heavier traffic, and also where grazing animals have congregated. So as well as damaging soil structure, compaction also affects your soil biology. So soil biology is the life in the soil. So soil is teeming with life. So in every teaspoon of soil, there's more microorganisms than there are people in earth. And these microorganisms are very important for the function of your soil. They are involved in nutrient transformations, nutrient cycling, and your soil biology is constantly responding to stresses and adapting to external stresses. So whenever there's heavy rainfall, flooding, it all affects your soil biology. It's constantly having to react to stresses. Even fertilizer applications, lime applications, these all affect your soil biology. And what we want to do is try and promote and enhance soil biology. It's very important in your overall soil health. And one of the ways we can look at how well our soil is functioning, there are a number of indicators we can measure. And one of the indicators of soil biology is to look at earthworms. This is a very simple measure that farmers can do on their farms. So if you dig a 20 by 20 by 20 centimetre pit, and you look at the soil and hand, so you can count the number of earthworms. So in that 20 by 20 by 20 centimetre pit, if you see less than 9 earthworms, that would be a cause for concern. If they're between 10 and 19, that is a good. You may need to review your soil health, and if they're above 20, that's very good soil health, but you need to constantly monitor that to make sure it doesn't decline. So soil health is a combination of your physical, biological and chemical parameters. So I've talked about the physical parameters and the biological, so I'm now going to briefly talk about your chemical health. So soil chemical health is your pH and your nutrients. So in the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, we have been collecting baseline soil chemical data over the last 3 years. We are on our final year now where we're in Zone 4, which is County Antrim. And farmers have been provided with soil nutrient results. We've sampled every field, every agriculture managed field, and looked at pH, pK, magnesium, calcium, sulfur, and also loss and ignition. So farmers receive nutrient maps like this with nutrient recommendations. So if you receive your results and your fields are coloured in a red, it means it's above optimum in that nutrient. So there's a separate map for pH, phosphorus, magnesium, sulfur, potassium. If it's green, it's optimum for that nutrient, and if it's yellow, it's below optimum. You also receive a runoff risk map. This is where areas of a field where there's a risk of nutrient runoff into waterways, and this will give guidance of where you need to be careful in terms of applying slurry, particularly in times of heavy rainfall. So I'm now going to show some results from the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. Okay, so the first map, this is soil pH. So these are catchment weighted means. So this means no individual farm can be identified in this map. So this is the mean soil pH over a catchment area. So obviously within this, there's individual farms, individual fields where the pH is above this value or below this value, but this is a catchment weighted mean. So the red colour here on the map is where the soil pH is optimum for grassland. So the target pH for grassland is 6 to 6.5. So the red colour in the map here, south of Lough Neagh over into the Ards Peninsula, this is where soil pH, the average soil pH was in the optimum range of 6 to 6.5. And this would indicate farmers within those areas are likely to have been soil tested, and there likely would have been lime applied quite recently to those fields. So the areas of the green, this first shade of green here, 5.5 to 6, so this is below optimum for grassland. So if you're growing silage here, the advice would be to apply lime. So lime is really important, soil pH is really important to improve nutrient use efficiency. So if your pH is in the optimum range, you get better use of the nitrogen you apply. It helps to mine phosphorus out of the soil. So it's really important in terms of the single thing you can do on your farm to improve nutrient use efficiency is to get your soil pH into the optimum range. So in the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, farmers receive maps of lime recommendations, and this will help bring your soil pH up into that optimum range. So soil pH, it relates to rainfall as well. So we see this east-west split here. So out in the west is a higher rainfall area. So high rainfall areas tends to acidify the soil. So the slightly lower pH in the West and Northern Ireland is likely due to higher rainfall, and also it may be due to slightly lower intensity agriculture in this area. Whereas in the southeast here, a lot of these farmers, there's a lot of arable farms here, a lot of dairy farms where they may have been soil testing regularly and have been applying lime. So this white region here, this is Zone 4. This is the zone we have been sampling this winter. So the results are still being processed for this zone, but at the end of this year, we should have a map of the whole of Northern Ireland. And you can see here just one final thing. So the yellowier areas here, these are generally upland areas. So in the south here, this is the Mournes. Then you can see the areas of the Sperrins, and then out in County Fermanagh here, this area is just south of Lough Erne. There'd be a lot of forestry here, lower intensity agriculture, a lot of peaty soils in these yellow areas. So generally, peaty soil is more naturally acidic. So the optimum pH for a peaty soil, you're talking pH 5.3, 5.5. We would not be recommending lime on peaty soils. They are naturally acidic. So in these mountainous upland areas, it's lower intensity agriculture, more peaty soil. So we would not be recommending lime in these areas. But in the more intensive agriculture areas where you're trying to produce as much optimum grass yields, you would want to be applying lime to get your pH up to the optimum range. Okay, so this is our phosphorus map here, and again this is catchment weighted means. No individual farm can be identified, and obviously within these areas there are individual fields on farms which may be higher than this result or lower than this result. So this is just the mean soil phosphorus for these areas. So this is plant available phosphorus measured using the Olsen test. So the target phosphorus index for grassland is an index 2+ for silage and 2- for grazing, and they are the green colours. So the orange colour there, this is where the soil phosphorus is index 3, and this is above optimum. So what we mean by that is this is in terms of plant requirement for phosphorus. So the orange areas there, there's more phosphorus there than your grass or crop needs. So essentially the soil is oversupplied with phosphorus, and you can see there's a large proportion of Northern Ireland where the soil phosphorus is above the agronomic optimum. There's more phosphorus in the soil than your grass needs. So farmers then will receive fertilizer recommendations based on these indexes. So generally, if your fields on your farm are index 3 or above, the recommendation is you do not need to apply any more phosphorus fertilizer. If there's index 2 or below, there's a recommendation for silage or grazing where you would need to apply phosphorus fertilizer. So you can see there are areas of Northern Ireland where the phosphorus levels are a lot lower. So this area out in Fermanagh, it's likely to be due to less intensive agriculture. There's a lot of extensive farms here, a lot of forestry, a lot of peatland. These soils would be naturally lower in phosphorus. They generally would not be receiving phosphorus inputs. They wouldn't be intensively managed, and so we can see on the map here that they are showing lower phosphorus levels. And only whenever usually we're working on an individual farm basis, but whenever you map the soils like this, which we have been able to do through Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, you can see these general patterns that are happening that are apparent across Northern Ireland. So you can see where there's lower intensity agriculture, you can see where there's mountainous areas, the moorns and the sperrins where there's less nutrient inputs. But obviously farmers receiving their results should look at their individual farm and follow the recommendations for their own individual farm. So there will be nutrient variation across a single farm between fields. So it's important that you follow the recommendations for your own farm. So this is a map here of potassium. So potassium is extremely important for silage, and we have seen a very clear east-west split with potassium. So potassium is very soluble in soil. It is washed out of soil very easily, and we can see here this pattern across Northern Ireland where the west of Northern Ireland generally has a lot lower potassium levels in the soil, and this is probably partly related to potassium being washed out of the soil because there's higher rainfall in the west than in the east. So partly there is less intensive management generally out in the west than compared to the east, but there's also higher rainfall which is washing nutrient out of the soil. So if you have silage fields out in the west here, if you're a farmer trying to grow silage, we would recommend that you apply potassium and look at your soil results. If you're index 2 or 2- or below for potassium, we would strongly recommend that you apply potassium to your silage fields particularly, but there's also a recommendation for grazing as well.
A couple of minutes, Suzanne, if that's okay.
Yep. nearly
Thank
done
you.
here. So
Yeah.
this is a map here of magnesium. So this is a very different distribution. So the factors that affect your soil nutrients are management, climate, but also underlying geology. And this is very clearly seen in this map of magnesium. So what we're seeing here in this part of the map here is very dark red color. That is where we're starting to get basalt parent material. So there's a large area of basalt parent rock across Antrim, up into the north coast there. And this is the underlying bedrock. So your soil is formed by the weathering of rock. So the soil often takes on the characteristics of the underlying rock. So a lot of this basalt parent material results in soils which are very high in trace elements, magnesium, iron, copper, zinc. A lot of those, and this is clearly seen in the soil results that we have from magnesium here. Where you can see where there's areas of basalt parent material. And often farmers would ask why their soil results are so high in magnesium. Partly it is due to slurry applications, so there'll be a lot of magnesium in slurry, but also there's a strong underlying influence of the bedrock. So if you're a farmer in this region of Northern Ireland where there's dark red, and probably a lot of the farmers in this zone 4 here will see a similar result to this, your soils will naturally be very high in magnesium. It's not harmful, there's just an underlying higher level in the soil, and it generally wouldn't be something particularly to worry about, but we can see it whenever we map Northern Ireland like this. Okay, so finally, just take home messages then. So healthy soil provides resilience on your farm. If your soil is healthy, it will recover from stress better. So for the like of this winter where we've had very high rainfall, a lot of flooding across Northern Ireland, if your soil is healthy, it will recover. Now, once the temperatures rise, sort of warmer weather, more sunshine, your soil will recover and you will be able to get a good first cut the healthier your soil is. One of the key things is to apply lime. If you have a lime requirement, this will improve your overall nutrient use efficiency. It'll make better use of nitrogen. It'll help mine phosphorus from the soil. So use your soil test results to guide your fertilizer applications. Okay, so that's all for me. I'm going to pass over to Brona now, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was really great, and it's really good to see the emerging results from the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme. And thanks for sticking to time as well. I'm going to introduce Brona now. Our second speaker, Brona O'Kane, is a suckler and beef farmer from Cookstown. She also works with the Growing Innovation Network, which connects farmers and growers to share knowledge, explore new ideas, and build better farming systems. Brona is also a member of the NFFN, Nature Friendly Farming Network, a farmer-led membership organisation that supports farmers who want to restore the balance between farming and nature. So Brona is going to talk about how she farms the soil's health on a farm in Tyrone. I would like to point out to everyone, there is a question and answer function, and we're going to have questions at the end of Brona's talk. So if you do have any burning questions for either Brona or Suzanne or one of the panelists, please, could you type in your questions as soon as you can? That's great. Thanks, Brona. Over to you.
Okay. Right, just share my screen here. Can you see it now, Lisa?
Yeah, that's perfect, Brona. Great.
Brilliant. Radio. So I work with the Growing Network, and we also organise the Feels Good event, and vice chair in the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and really being a part of these networks and chatting with other farmers is really, really valuable to me. So I started off as an aircraft mechanic in the Royal Air Force for 12 years, and then ran a textile design business with another girl for 7 years before I ended up back home and on the farm. And I never thought I'd end up back here, but I sort of try to explain this a bit because I didn't grow up with it. So I kind of came to farming knowing nothing and asking everything. I think it's just been a part of my journey. And when I asked Dad if I could take on the farm, he did say, you know, that the hardest part here and your biggest challenge will be our poor soil. And I went straight out and dug a hole, and you know, In the wintertime, it looks like this. You stand there and the water starts permeating back out of the ground. So you can imagine if you were grazing sheep on that, what a mess it would be at the end. So I just knew from the get-go that getting the soil to drain better and aggregate better was something I had to focus on. So I guess from the get-go, I did have my head in the kind of soil health space. So that was 2020, 21, I got a soil test. And then I felt it wasn't quite deep enough. So 2022, I went and got a full spectrum test done. And that was like told me my soil composition of sand, silt, clay. And then I realized that I had like no sand anywhere and it was just full on sort of 50-50 silt clay. And when you only have 6 inches of soil sitting on top of clay, it's really, really important to try and get that clay soil to aggregates, because it was just so difficult to deal with on the shoulder seasons. And you know, as much as you can, it's amazing soil in the drought. It just keeps working away, but it's so easy to lose structure. So getting air into the soil was I felt the limiting factor to my grass growth. So when I started trying to think about how was I going to change this farm for me and my lifestyle and my context, I first of all started thinking about, well, if I'm going to change these grass types and things, I'm going to need a breed that's quite suited to it. So changing the bull to an Angus and working more native breeds so that they wouldn't be as picky about what they were eating as I was kind of transitioning things. And also being on my own, I needed to have animals that were kind of safer and easier for me to manage, better temperaments. But moving that 700, 800 kilo cow down to a 600 kilo cow to help with that kind of compaction. And I'd learned quite early on that grazing could have a really big benefit. So from the get-go, I was trying to learn as much as I could about grazing management. And also thinking about the inputs. So, you know, we had a lot of slurry and farmyard manure. So I just knew I've got to try and focus on making those inputs as good as they can be. And then I had to think about, well, how was I going to start monitoring these things that I was trying, you know, like to know what was working and what wasn't. And then how was the livestock going to adapt to these changes was a biggie as well. You start sort of pulling out the ones that didn't like the changes. So this is my soil analysis from my soil nutrient health scheme. I got it this time last year. So each row here is a different field. And I thought something that was quite interesting to point out was that second row down, when you see the soil organic matter is only 8.6. In 2022, that soil organic matter was tested and said it was 17.6. So in 3 years, it's dropped from 17 to 8%. And the only thing that I did was plough it. And I just thought it might be an interesting one if people want to discuss it or something. Like, did I lose that much organic matter from one ploughing? Or was it just not having enough farmyard manure go on? Or what? I don't know. I'm still curious to retest it this year just in case it's a funny anomaly. And then the pH is really the big one from my soil test that I really need to address, and lime everywhere. Now, as much as that same field I'm talking about was 5.5 pH 3 years ago, and it's naturally risen to 5.7. It's not very cost effective for me to wait for the pHs all to rectify themselves. So lime is a biggie for me. The other thing I did was, because I really cut back and then stopped bagged fertilizer, and I just thought my soil test was showing my P's and K's were all okay, and I really just needed to focus on making better slurry and farmyard manure. So I got my manure tested. It was 2-year-old manure. And I wanted to test nutrients, but I also wanted to see what the biology in it was, because if you don't have the biology in your manure, you're losing a lot more nutrients that they can continue to cycle and work and make plant available. And for me, it was just the magic of what these microbes can do. So like the third one down is the protozoa row that came up as really high. So, and these guys just continue to mineralize nitrogen, and they're just kind of have a huge effect on it. And then testing things like for nematodes to make sure that I wasn't growing some kind of, you know, like your root eating nematodes. in my manure, but finding that I just had bacterial feeders. So again, those guys just eat bacteria and just poop out a nitrogen that's in a plant available form. And then it was able to tell me what was my potential nitrogen release in the next 3 to 6 months, which like was really high at 336 kilos. But I would probably have a more realistic view that I would probably only be getting 100 kilos of nitrogen of it being released maybe over the next 3 to 6 months. So then I got the nutrients tested in it as well. And like it's decent enough levels. The big one for me was on like the pH was 7, and that's a good indicator that the manure had sort of gone through a good decomposition process in it, so that whenever it went out on the ground, it disappears really quickly. So it went out at the back end of October, and you would barely see it in the field now at all. So thinking about the things I wanted to change was, you know, getting an Angus bull, trying to breed slightly smaller cow, less weight, bringing sheep in to help break a worm burden, get that grazing pattern sorted out, and getting diversity into reseeds, reducing synthetic fertilizer. I just don't think I needed the extra nutrients. I had enough on farm, and then doing less trafficking on the ground. So I don't bother with things like topping or rolling. Maybe quite a lazy farmer. I started trying to learn, like, I can get a soil test result for chemistry, but like what else was indicators could I look for? So things like trying to read my weeds and what were they telling me? Chickweed was a problem before, but it really, I think, was just telling me it was excess nitrates, and putting slurry and bagged fertilizer on was just too much. We were just getting a real flush of chickweed come up after slurry, and now I would really just do 1 tanker, like max 2,000 gallons to an acre, and that's made quite a big difference. Creeping buttercup was a real tell that, you know, grazing too tight and leaving bare soil. And probably before me, sheep used to come in and graze here in the winter, and you know, they just did a lot of that paddling, made a lot of bare soil, and then you've got acidic conditions. So creeping buttercup was a real issue, and docks was a massive issue. But docks for me, I don't think really was compaction. When I put calcium on the ground, it really started to turn around my docks, and now they're just quite a weak, sick plant. The inputs, I moved from bag nitrogen to foliar nitrogen, and then since that I've really only just put on straight nitrogen, if once really, I think in the last 4 years, just to push for silage once last season. I make my own slurry bugs, so that you know, they really are a game changer for no smell of slurry, and you can like mix it so much easier, but definitely that smell. So for me, it was hoping that I was binding more of that ammonia into the slurry with them. I just make them myself because I like a wee experiment on the side. Making that worm compost extract for me, I won't really get into that. It's maybe a bit of my woo-woo practices, but really I use the worm poop as a seed coating, and then eggshells I brought in to address calcium in my soil, and really I'll keep rabbiting on about trying my best to make really good farmyard manure. And the worm farm was a bit of a side obsession for me, because you know, when you, like Suzanne was saying, the value of worms in the soil is just incredible, and it's a really good signal of soil health. So when I found out like this here, the value of what's in the worm's poop when it's tested against surrounding soil, they're just free mineral cyclers for you in the ground, and they can have a huge impact on water infiltration and creating air pockets in the soil. And that's just a recipe for making the lactic acid bacteria, the lactobacillus bug for your slurry. I also spray this into my cattle bedding. It helps sort of start breaking the lignin in the straw while it's in the house before it even gets to the manure pit. And I would use it to outcompete bad bugs when I'm lambing. I don't disinfect anything now. The power of the plant was a biggie there. You know, whenever I started reseeding and getting diversity into the ground, and I just started making my own mixes to just for a certain problem field. Maybe this was a field of rushes that I wanted to address, but really that image there of that variety of root structure, that was key for me. That's what I wanted my underground root structure to look like, because at the start it was really just a 3-inch band of roots, and you know, I had another 3 inches of soil that the plant wasn't even accessing. I just put a seed hopper on my slurry tanker because I figured if I'm going out there and spreading slurry, I might as well try and get seeds out, and just always trying to add to that diversity and mix. So be like clovers and chicory and grasses and all sorts in there. But the grazing, I think the grazing's been like the single biggest lever for soil health for me. And it's not really something anybody can tell you, you know, just do this, because it just keeps changing from year to year and field to field. So, but really for me, it was moving away from a target of kind of a 3-week block. And I just try and give much longer rest periods. So the plant will go through its recovery phase, but then after that, I want to give it a longer rest, because I'm finding that's whenever my roots are getting a chance then to grow a bit deeper. So I just show you some pictures of variety of grazing. So this is, you know, a lot of the ryegrass has gone shot there, but when you look, the picture in the middle is when you look down into that, you know, there was still a lot of the multi-species in there, and it was at the back end of the year. So I knew it was too wet. I wasn't going to get the dung out on that field, and they were already starting to sort of poach a bit. So my view then was, okay, let's get the cows to do a trample and put this long grass down in contact with the soil, and that'll give me a green manure and cover my soil through the winter. So it was just thinking of using the cows as a tool to do something for me. And the wasted grass just became plant food. I had creep and bent in this field, so I just waited till it was wetter, and I bunched them up and I made them poach it really hard. So again, it was just kind of using grazing as a tool. And this is just an example of when I didn't move the fence fast enough, and then they pace. And then the shape of the paddocks was having a big difference. So it was always trial and error trying to figure it out. And then through the summer, I would just, on the clover fields, I would kind of get them skimming it, because I didn't want to damage that clover too much. So sometimes I was even shifting twice a day, trying to figure out what's the right size of paddock here. So the grazing is still something I don't have an answer for, but I just keep changing it all the time, and it's always about never taking too much off at a time. And I find for my clay soil that helps. So the things that I would just do to monitor soil health now is go out and dig holes all the time. I'm always doing worm counts, and I just check how easy is that spade going into the ground. And now it's massive difference. And then I'm looking to see, are my roots going deeper, and have I got compaction anywhere, or and I'm always poking around in poo because I can just tell you so much about the soil life. So like whenever the dung beetle here showed up and moved in, that was just a pretty magic moment for me. That took some time to get to. So like they are amazing cyclers of dung. They can make it disappear so fast and bring all that nutrients down into the soil quickly. And then I wanted to learn about like what could the plants tell me about soil health? So like looking at the roots, you know, do I have a lot of soil sticking to the roots? And not really, because it takes fungi to do that. And in my wet soils, it's really difficult for me to build a really good fungal relationship there. So that's something I'm still working on. But checking the nodules of the clovers, are they actually fixing nitrogen or not? You know, if they're not pink, they're not actually fixing nitrogen. So then I know I haven't got the biology working. Looking at leaf signals there, you know, like crinkling leaves or discoloration or things like that. And then that picture with the top right is a Brix refractometer. So I'm always testing my grass sugars, you know, to see how healthy it is. And, you know, if I'm getting up and above 10, I'm happy. But generally I'm in around 6 to 10 most of the time. And then like the livestock has been like amazing change. And it could be a multiple factors of you know, less numbers, less intensification, but the fertility is really turned around, and no calf deaths. Last year was the first year of calving where there was no meds or anything, no interventions. I didn't even dip a navel. And then a fecal egg count for worm and fluke now. But like the savings on the vet bill has just been amazing. And they're always a pretty calm herd to work with. I'll just skip through the epigenetics because we don't have time. But the daily live weight gains have just been incredible.
Brennan, if you wanted to spend a wee 30 seconds on epigenetics.
So epigenetics for me was because I was changing the environment, and like you can see a really rushy field there. It was awful, but I purposely put the calves out there in their first grazing because I want them to learn how to ruminate and convert that sort of stuff. And at the beginning when I did it, that's when I really started seeing which cows weren't going to be suited to the system. But that calf, in particular in that picture, grew at 1.6 kilos a day with 0 grain in its diet at all, and yet it was grazing in fields like this. So it's just trying to, you can influence the genetics by the environment and the lifestyle, and then that starts to pass on as you breed forward. And that was just kind of the results of last year's daily live weight gains. It was kind of the first year where it seemed to everything started falling into place. I think calving outside has an effect on that for getting that good start, and cows are happy and healthy. And just finish with the signals that you can start seeing from nature. Just a variety of bugs and moths and things that start showing up now around the farm. And I think too, when you're conscious of it, you see it a lot, and the dock beetle coming in and just devastating a whole field of docks is just incredible. But from living in Scotland and coming back home, it was the first thing I noticed here was I felt the countryside was very quiet, and I was used to having stoats in the garden and hearing corn creek in the fields. So for me, I did feel a bit responsible if I was going to manage the farm. I felt a bit responsible for trying to do my bit for wildlife as well. So that's me. One message is dig more holes. Just have a look at what's going on, because the soil health, like Suzanne says, can have a huge effect on your bottom line. And that's me.
Great, Bronagh, thank you. That was a really interesting talk, and I'm sure everybody's going to be interested for your answers to some questions here. So I'd like to introduce our 3 panel members. The first one is Albert Johnson, who is Head of Knowledge Advisory Service at CAFRE. If the panelists want to put on their cameras, that'd be great. And we have John Egerton, who's a suckler sheep farmer from County Fermanagh. John, do we have you on audio yet?
Hopefully I'm on now.
You
Can you
are.
hear me
We
now?
can hear you loud and clear. That's great. And then we have Richard Beattie, who is president of the Young Farmers Club of Ulster. So if everyone on the panel wants to put on the cameras. So we do have one question in the Q&A, and I maybe ask Bronagh this. How do you get more worms on your farm? Everything you've said before, probably.
Yeah, I think people think I started the worm farm. They thought I was breeding worms to put them out in the fields, but it's not. It was really just, it's pretty incredible. Once you kind of have the right conditions, they just show up on masses. I think it was a bit of a combination of, really pulling back on chemicals and giving the ground a bit more rest, and a variety of plants for them to, and that trampled grass there was dead stuff on the top for them to eat.
Okay, that's great. Suzanne, the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme results emerging is really exciting. I think some of those maps you showed are really, really interesting. I suppose the question is, where can people see their Soil Nutrient Health Scheme results, and when are sort of the maps? I know you presented the maps today, but are they going to be available anytime soon for people to, look over?
Yes, so every individual farmer will have their own results, and they can see those through the government gateway. In terms of the results for the whole scheme across Northern Ireland, like I showed there tonight, so they are not published yet. So we haven't finished the scheme yet. So we are still sampling zone 4, and those maps will be produced then this year. So maybe by the end of this year, we will have those maps available, and they will be published at a later date, but not until the scheme is finished.
That's great, thanks. And Albert, working with CAFRE, I'm sure your advisors are asked a lot about, how do we read soil results, and how do we relate that to soil health and improving soil health?
Yeah, the soil analysis results that are available through the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme are a really, really useful resource that every farm will have received now that has been part of the Soil Nutrient Health Scheme, especially at this time of year. And over the past few weeks, we're all aware of the increase in fertilizer prices. So it's key now to say, look, what's the actions that you can take on farm to try and maximize the value from either the nutrients you have on your farm or that you're going to be buying in through fertilizers. And I suppose from Suzanne's presentation there, it was really good to see there's large parts of the country there that would benefit from applying lime. And when your soil pH levels are low, you're not getting the most value from the fertilizers that you're buying. So the key nutrient or the key material to buy at this time of year to try and or to invest in over the next period of time is lime to get your soil pHs up. If it's not a peat soil, but other soil types, get them up into that 6 to 6.5. If your soil pH is in that range, then you are getting the most out of it. And then the other key piece of advice that the CAFRE advisors will be giving to farmers at this time of year is target your slurry to the fields that need it the most. So from your soil analysis reports, as Suzanne shown from her presentation, on the soil maps that you'll get back as part of the soil nutrient health scheme, it gives you the colour coding. So fields that are red are probably oversupplied or in excess. The ones that are green are an optimum, and the ones that are in yellow require additional nutrients. So targeting the slurry to slurry or farmyard manure to those fields that are going to benefit the most from that. And especially there in terms of potassium. Slurry can be high in potassium, and it's good way of actually getting your potassium levels increased by trying to get slurry, especially at this time of year, onto those fields, because potassium is a key nutrient linked back to silage production, and you want to try and get those fields up into optimum levels. So those are some of the key things, and then always then you're using purchased in fertilizers to top up and balance the nutrient requirements. So if you've got your lime and your pH levels addressed and sorted, and again you've utilized the nutrients from your slurries and your farmyard manures, it's then looking to see what additional nutrients do I need and how best to get those. And it's actually picking the right fertilizer to meet those requirements. And it may be only just straight nitrogen's required, or in certain fields it may be nitrogen with potash, just to address, depending on whether it's a grazing land or it's for silage cutting. So, and again, if anybody does have any queries in relation to their soil analysis results, the CAFRE advisors in the local DARE direct offices are available to provide advice and support. The other key thing is for all farmers that have received their soil nutrient analysis as part of the soil nutrient health scheme, there is free training available, and that can be accessed through the CAFRE website, and there are a number of face-to-face sessions that are currently being delivered as well, and you'll see advertisements in the local agricultural press for those. So and again, there's plenty of advice available there for anybody that has any queries at this time of year.
That's great. Thank you, Albert. And a lot of advice and resource out there for anyone needing help. In terms of lime, maybe ask you, Suzanne, first. When do you think, when is the best time to apply lime? Is it now, or what's the window of application?
I think the window is whenever you can get it out. So there are very few opportunities. Unfortunately, it's difficult to get a window to put out lime. If you apply it in the autumn, it gives the lime time to dissolve over the winter, so it can bring the pH up slowly over the winter months. So by the time you get to the next spring, your pH hopefully will be in the desirable range. The only advice would be not to apply lime too close to nitrogen applications, which makes spring application of lime more difficult than summer applications of lime. You would want to leave 3 or 4 weeks at least between lime and nitrogen application, because it can increase ammonia emissions. So trying to just leave a gap between lime and any slurry or nitrogen fertilizer is a key thing. But you can apply lime at any time of the year, as long as if there's a window and opportunity to do so. But I would just advise you to avoid it too close to nitrogen.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. And I suppose with the weather we're having recently, those opportunities are few and far between. So it is difficult trying to get it right. Just moving on to John quickly. John, as a sheep farmer, how do you look after soil health, or what approaches do you take towards prioritizing soil?
Yeah, well, our soil is our best asset, basically. But I was glad to hear Suzanne saying about the West, about how the K especially was being leached out of the soil. For historically, our ground would be low in P's and K's, and it has been difficult to raise that. In early years, we tried to raise it by adding artificial fertilizer, but we really made no progress on that. And even slurry applications, the progress was very slow. It wasn't until we started, we rear calves as well, and the farmyard manure, putting that out, targeting the fields that are low in P's and K's in the autumn time. With the farmyard manure was the first thing that actually brought our P's and K's up to close to where they should be. The lime has been an issue as well. Historically, our ground would have all been 5.5 to 5.7 pH, and it has been difficult to get that up. It's a slow process. You can't add too much lime in the one go, and to raise it a couple of points per year is about as much as you can expect to do. We've also tried to introduce clover and multi-species into the swards as well. They've been difficult. Conditions are poor in the West, and it's hard. It's hard to manage the clover, and it's hard to manage the multi-species. We were in the grass. William's still in the grass check program, and it was interesting to hear Brona saying the complete opposite to what we have been taught through the grass check program. We've been taught to eat it in 3 days and give it 3 weeks to recover and to eat it down low. Whereas Brona is doing the complete opposite and getting tremendous performance from it. Probably not stocked as heavy as, but getting tremendous growth rates, and I think it was tremendous to hear that. As for soil, we're trying to put the most of the slurry out with low emission spreading. As Susanna said, low pressure tires, wide tires, all pipe system. Trying to do our best. It's not always easy, and it's not always easy getting the right conditions to go out. Seems to be the windows of opportunity seem to be so small, so it's difficult, but we try to do our best. So that's basically all I have to say on that now.
That's great. Thanks, John. Really interesting to hear your perspective as well. Just moving on to Richard, you represent young farmers, and do you find that young farmers are engaged in soil testing and looking after soil health?
Yes, so within the Young Farmers, we have our Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Committee, and also Young Farmers, we also run quite a lot of competition. So in the last couple of years, we started our Grassland competition. Seeing John there as past president of the Grassland Society, major part in managing grassland. Grassland starts with the soils. The soil is the most important asset in any farm. So by doing that there, running that competition, we're seeing members to bring externals to assess their management on farm, and I can see how what makes their farm work better maybe compared to their peers across the province. So this is free competitions. We're doing that there. We also have within our Agri-Environment and Rural Affairs Committee, we also bring in external speakers. A big part of that is soil health. So regardless of what your farming background, be it your crops, dairy, beef, sheep, your soil is our most important, valuable asset. So educating our members on how to better manage their soil so that they can grow more grass, grow more crops, and ultimately be a more profitable business. Because if you haven't got the grass and can't manage it as well through the soils, what really do you have? So yeah, we do a lot of that there, including the competition such as our sedage making competition as well. So we're always trying to bring awareness to our members, and currently at the moment we've just released our new strategic plan, and we surveyed the members, and more of them do want to have more on-farm learning and learning how to run farm businesses. So it's something we're going to be looking at more so in the future and have more on-farm visits to educate our members.
Excellent, thank you. I think, we're hearing very strongly that peer learning is really important, and hopefully that's what we're doing here as well. There's a couple of questions here. Maybe the first one to you, Suzanne. How important is it to use high calcium lime rather than magnesium pink lime? Or does it not matter really?
Yeah, well, I think if you're an area of if your soil test has already shown very high magnesium in your soil, you'd be better not to use dolomitic lime where there's magnesium in the lime as well. You want to try and not to apply any more magnesium to an already high magnesium soil. So in those cases, you're better with more of the calcium lime. So it depends on where your farm is situated and the magnesium status of the soil at whenever you're through your soil test.
Okay, that's great. And there's another question here, maybe Brona. Will eggshells help balance soil pH better than lime?
No, I wouldn't say it's a really high, it's 95% calcium in that eggshell, and calcium alone can't quite change soil pH, but you might see an increase in it. It might tweak it a bit, but for me, the eggshells was calcium helps open soil, while it's magnesium's pulling it tight. So for me, in the clay soil, I just wanted to help open it. So it was more for that than it was to address pH. There's nothing like lime for that.
Right. Okay. And Brona, just you've obviously learned an awful lot about soil health. For somebody who you say you've come back to farming, and where have you picked up your information and knowledge? Because it's quite extensive.
I joined that nature friendly farming group quite early, and then I think maybe I was only farming a couple of years and started working with growing, and really I just learned just make friends with farmers who are way better than you and have them on speed dial. But
Yeah.
it really had I went on a lot of courses and I've read a lot, and I have studied at Greenmounts. But yeah, having that peer network has been so valuable. Like, you can be book smart in one sense, but having a farmer who's really been through it to help you think of it from another angle that maybe you can't learn from a book has been really helpful.
That's great, thank you. So I've got a question here from Jim McAdam. How best to increase and retain your soil organic matter content? I don't know. Does anybody want to volunteer to answer that? I'm sort of leaning towards Suzanne and Brona for this. So how best to increase and retain your soil organic matter content?
Yeah, so the best way is not to disturb the soil. So as soon as you plough up soil, you're going to lose organic matter. So a permanent grassland soil has a lot more organic matter in it than an arable soil where you're constantly ploughing it. Also adding farmyard manure or slurry. So although slurry has obviously slurry has a lot of phosphorus in it and there's issues with slurry. Slurry has a lot of organic matter and it's very good for the soil in terms of building up the organic matter. So adding organic materials like farmyard manure, slurry is very good for the soil, as is leaving it, in a permanent grass or, not disturbing it.
That's great, thanks. We're sort of coming towards the end of the webinar now, and before I hand over to Richard Beattie, who's going to close for us, thank you very much, Richard. I just want to highlight that there is a feedback form, so if anybody has time, we really would appreciate your feedback on the seminar and the content and the quality. So Richard, I'm going to hand over to you to close the webinar, and thank everybody here who's taken part.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been certainly very interesting. I know Suzanne and Brona, it's great to see your different perspective on it. Certainly, Suzanne, it's very interesting to see you develop and picture across the map and the soil tests and are seeing. It's certainly answered my question why my magnesiums are so high in County Antrim. So I've got that one there answered. Certainly, yourself, Brona, it's amazing just the results you are achieving from it, like your average daily life gains, and just highlighting the importance of soil health as animal health there as well, and how you can manipulate that there to drive overall performance. So yeah, certainly it's great to see. So yeah, thank you very much for everybody for joining us, particularly on behalf of myself as well have asked to be on the panel this evening. It's a great honour. So the third webinar session will be the 25th of March, where we're to invest, optimise grassland productivity. Speakers for AFBI are agronomist Paul Cotney and Andy Wright from the Ulster Farmers Union, the panellists Paul Turley, Jason Rankin from Agri-Food. So see you all on the 25th of March. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye bye.